My name is Jace Andreessen. I'm the president and CEO for Baton Rouge Gallery. It is a pleasure to have you with us. If you would, before we do anything else, please give our partners at CPEX a big round of applause for putting this panel together today. It is a pleasure to have CPEX involved with the gallery and with this special exhibition that we have really been looking forward to for a good long while now. We've really been happy to bring it to Baton Rouge and give everyone the opportunity to see this special work. If you haven't enjoyed the show already, or if this is your first time, this show is titled Cloudburst, the work of Matt Kenyon. Matt Kenyon is a Baton Rouge-born artist who was born and raised here, now calls Buffalo, New York home, and this is his first exhibition in his hometown. His work has been seen in the Museum of Modern Art and is in their permanent collection. He is also a TED Fellow and has been shown all over the world, but this is Baton Rouge's first opportunity to see his work. So we are thrilled to have that work here. If you are interested, you can pick up an exhibition catalog on your way out. It's a 52-page document that details every single piece in the show. Among them is the work that this panel discussion was organized in response to, which is titled Tide. That is the big champagne glass tower that is in the front room. Tide is an installation employing a controlled but continuous drip of water that falls onto a pyramid of over 1,500 champagne glasses, each one containing a miniature model of a house cast from a material developed by the artist that has the same refractive index as water, making the houses invisible to the naked eye when submerged. Tide is a response to the next American housing crisis, property that has lost its value due to the effects of rising water and climate change. Through the fluctuating visibility of these houses, Tide calls attention to the way climate change continues to create uncertainty in neighborhoods long after the news cycle has moved on from each individual extreme weather event. The work was inspired in part by the flooding that Baton Rouge experienced in 2016, during which 13 lives were lost, 146,000 homes or businesses were damaged or destroyed, and that includes the home of the artist's father and stepmother among them. It also caused nearly $4 billion in residential damages alone. We are thrilled to have CPEX with us, and we are thrilled to have each of the three panelists with us tonight. We'll let them introduce themselves, but if you would, one more time, a round of applause for CPEX.
Thank you so much, Jason, and to the Baton Rouge Gallery for putting on this event and shedding light on the existential crisis we have occurring in Louisiana and on our coast, and also places across the globe. I want to say to you tonight that we're not going to paint a rose-colored picture for you, and it's going to be a hard conversation because we want to shed light on the realities of Louisiana's coast, which has been dying for some time, and there are people, real people there that have been holding the torch, fighting for their community's future, fighting for their culture, fighting for their children's livelihoods, and we're going to talk about that. I'm really grateful to be able to bring to you two dear friends of mine from the Bayou up here to Baton Rouge, because in Baton Rouge I often get the sense that people aren't as connected to what's happening on our coast. And I know we enjoy its riches. We enjoy its seafood, we enjoy the culture, we enjoy going down to Venice. I mean, how many people have been to Pointe-aux-Chenes? Pasalutra? Chauvin? Okay, so you know this is the salt of the earth. This is where the people that the reason I stayed or wanted to fight in this world for Louisiana was because of my interactions in coastal Louisiana. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to ask Chief Shirell to introduce herself, Jonathan, and then we're going to get into a discussion. I started loving the coast as a child. My father was a scientist for the state and would take me to the different refugees and camps along the coast, and I really found a love for Louisiana. It became very interesting to me. This interest continued in my graduate studies, where I worked with a Native American fishing community in Lower Plaquemines Parish for 2 years, collecting their oral histories. and as a good researcher, focusing on climate change and adaptation and what that meant for the Grand Bayou community. Right after that, Katrina and Rita hit, and that was a big call for me to say, I've got to stay here, I've got to jump in the fight, and I've got to make planning and climate change part of the equation for how we're going to help Louisiana's coastal communities. I was fortunate to eventually find the Center for Planning Excellence, which was founded by Boo Thomas and Cordell Heyman, who is here, who was leading a large effort in 2006 to create a plan for the future of Louisiana's coastal communities. Since that time, Center for Planning Excellence has been dedicated to our coastal communities, dedicated to communities across Louisiana, but especially grappling with the really hard challenges that our coastal communities face. Questions around, should we stay? Where do we go? How do we move? How do we live here? What are the tools? What are the planning tools? And so with that, I am incredibly dedicated to the people of coastal Louisiana, and I hope that you all walk away with some feeling of responsibility as well. Of we are all one place. This Baton Rouge isn't Baton Rouge without all of the influences from the region, which is coastal Louisiana, and they're struggling right now. I met Chief Shirell, I'm not sure exactly when, but she and I had a wonderful time really spearheading or having lots of discussions around the future of coastal Louisiana. But thanks to Charles Sutcliffe's work and the development of the Climate Initiatives Task Force, we were able to get really close over the past couple of years working on the Climate Initiatives Task Force and charting out a path for Louisiana. And Jonathan and I have been friends for a long time, and he's a very special person, and came back to Louisiana to fight for this place, building a home, watching his family leave from Chauvin, moving up to Houma, renovating beautiful buildings, and both of these people, both Chief Shirell and Jonathan, have been grappling with the aftermath of Ida. And so with that, before we get started, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then when we talk, we're going to talk a little bit about the past, then we're going to talk about the present, and then we're going to talk about the future. And I will open it up for questions after that. So Chief, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to be here with all of you this evening. My name is Shirell Parfait-Dardar. I am the traditional chief of the Grand Caillou Dulac Band of Biloxi-Chitimacha-Choctaw. And we reside in coastal Louisiana, of course, the community of Grand Caillou Dulac and Chauvin. I also currently serve as the chairwoman for the Louisiana Native American Commission, and I serve as the indigenous representative for the Climate Initiatives Task Force. And I am also a co-founder and serve as the secretary for the First Peoples Conservation Council of Louisiana. In my spare time, I'm a mama of four. So just really honored to be here with all of you this evening, and hopefully we can cover some good topics, right?
Well, thank you, Chief. Jonathan?
My name is Jonathan Foret. I'm the executive director of the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center in Houma. I grew up in Chauvin and sort of traveled around a bit, went to school in New York City, also joined the Peace Corps, served in the Kingdom of Tonga, worked for a nonprofit out in Bangladesh, worked for the United Nations in the Asia Pacific region, came back to the States and got my master's in public administration. And I was planning on going back overseas doing international development work when somebody came up to me and said, why are you going to try to help other people fix their problems when we have so many problems to fix over here? And you need to help your family and friends here. And nobody had ever said that to me before. So I asked her, so what are you thinking? And she said, I have this organization that I'd like for you to run. And that was the Wetlands Discovery Center. 12 years ago, I took that position and been there ever since.
And while there, you got a nutria or
I was going to bring him tonight. His name is Beignet, but I had to go straight from work to here. It would have been a lot of, commotion to get him from his enclosure at my house. I do have a permit to have him because you can't just have invasive species, regularly at your house. But I got him. Nutria are an invasive species. There's a bounty program. You shoot them, you cut off their tails, and you get $6. So some of my students were out shooting nutria, found a rather large one. It shot it. Its belly was moving around a little bit, so they eviscerated it and found baby nutria inside. Some of them didn't make it, but little Beignet survived when they brought him to me, and then I fed him with a little bottle and puppy milk. And he's an invasive species. I should have never done that. Like, I get it, but
he's so cute. Though.
He's sweet. He's sweet. People usually invite me to things because they want to see the nutria and have no interest in what I have to say.
I
so
did
thank
ask.
you for, thanks for asking what I have to say. But she did ask, can you bring the nutria? That's why I'm here, ladies and gentlemen, only because she wanted the nutria.
Well, Well, okay. Let's set the scene for everyone. Talk about coastal Louisiana growing up, the home that you grew up in, what it was like, what culture was like, what you loved most about it. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, I was born in 1980, and
Oh, you're younger than me.
I feel like I'm 95. But the Bayou communities, when I was growing up, we had a lot of families down there still. We had a lot of just traditions that we were brought up with. Like, I was raised extremely traditional, especially for, indigenous peoples. I was raised by my grandmother, my mom's mom, so that my mom and dad could work. And, when you spend so much time with your grandparent, so your parents can work, because we have children young, right? And she got very attached to me and would not let me go. So you will see that, down in the bayou areas where Mama and Papa took care of the, the grandchild so mom and dad could work. And then they're like, well, no, you can't have them back now. I raised them all these years, but and it was more than that, that was something that was very traditional among my people. But I was busy learning, the ways of the women of my tribe. Now we weren't worried about all that stuff back then, defining things no, we were just busy being, right? I really miss those days where I could just be naive and just be native, because it was good then. All we did was held to our traditions and fed our family and loved each other, and it was a good time, and I can remember as a child, we used to go running through the woods. I mean, we were always outside, right? You can even tell my mom had kids when we were growing up, but there were so much woods, to run through, and like over the years, it slowly went away, right? And it wasn't until I was older that we had done, some aerial, an aerial flyover, right, with one of my deputy chiefs, because I can't fly. And she came back and she was crying. When you're walking around the community, you still see some trees. It can be very deceiving, right, up until you can see it from above. And it was then that we realized how much our lands had changed and how much land we didn't have, right? And then that explains so much more, right? Because, for example, I remember Hurricane Juan. I was 5. And we rode that out on Mr. Willis Trosclair shrimp boat. That was typical.
Will you tell them how you ride a storm out? How do you ride it out?
No, absolutely. So everyone in the community usually gets on some of the larger shrimp boats, right? And these are the really big boats, right? They have the real big booms that set out. And we would all get on a shrimp boat that was tied up, and safe harbor. and we would ride it out, right? The winds would come, the waters would come, the booms would be set out, so keep the boat balanced. You had everything you needed there, right? You had food, you had ice, you had water, a place to get cleaned up. And the storm would pass, everything would calm down. Several of the people would go out into the community to see how, what was the damage. If it was safe for everybody to go back home, we'd go back home. And we'd start cleaning up, right? Start doing what we needed to do. And the community worked together to do that. Of course, we still had access to a lot of our own resources back then. So we were much more self-sustaining back then. Well, you can't do that today. All right. We had so much more land back then, right? That served as a barrier, okay, between the winds, the waters, and the people. Well, over time, those lands eroded, they sank, they're not existing anymore. So that storm, when it hits, it's right on us. We no longer have those barriers between the people and the storm that we used to. So we've literally had to watch a lot of our self-sustaining practices erode with the land, right? Along with our traditional medicines. My great-grandmother was a traiteur. That's a healer in our language. We all called her Mamatia. And she had the cutest little house. It's comfortable. Everyone respected her. She had this fun top of her head. We saw her hair down a couple times. It actually touched the floor. Because it was, she took a vow she could not cut her hair. Long story short, your hair is an extension of your nervous system. So, we no longer have traiteurs like we used to, because we no longer have the medicinal plants that we used to. See, as we lose land, we lose so much more than just land. And with that, we've had to watch our family and our friends move away because they just couldn't go through, those disasters, and with access to less and less resources to recover and less assistance with understanding more and more programs that you have to go through to access those resources. Well, you can't fault them for trying to get out of harm's way. Now, we do still have many of us that are there, myself as well. I can't move my husband in the city, it's just not gonna work. But it's more than that. Many of us still feel a sense of responsibility to our homeland, and we've been actively educating ourselves on these outside processes, right, that are required to be able to get things done, right? Because back in the day, we saw a problem, we'd go, in the middle of the night, fix it up, and hey, it's done. You can't do that today. You have a multitude of different processes that you have to go through just to be able to put up a mailbox. So we're learning too. And as we learn, we start to figure out ways to implement things to try to protect and preserve what we have left.
Thank you for that. And Jonathan, in what area were you in as a child?
I grew up down Grand Caillou, Dulac at Shepherd's Row.
Okay.
Yes.
And so Chauvin, not too far, but
Right.
Talk to us. Yeah. One finger over.
Chauvin in the 80s was magical. It was like the things that you see in books and television shows where you can go explore, like Alice in Wonderland, how you just walk into the woods and then you are led into this whole different world. And so as a kid in Chauvin and being on the bayou, you could just let your imagination run wild and have a wonderful experience. My favorite pastime was playing in the ditch. And so the best birthday present I ever got was a minnow trap that my parents had got me. And I was able to put that in the ditch in front of our house that usually had a lot of water, and caught all kinds of critters, including snakes that my mama was terrified of, But it was, that in itself was an education, you know? And then I remember you mentioned Hurricane Juan. I remember having my minnow trap then, and the water went down, and I remember putting my minnow trap in the ditch and caught a whole slew of different species that I never traditionally caught in the ditch, and was just amazed. They're like, look, we don't catch this kind of little bitty catfish in the ditch. It's usually just minnows. And so even that, as a young kid, was an education on how all of these systems interact with each other. Our community it was family. It was everybody knew each other, which sometimes is good and sometimes it's bad, because you couldn't. I mean, you couldn't get away with anything, because like, oh, I saw him doing that on, even if it's 3 streets over, and then before you got home, your mom knew everything that had already taken place. But there was also a lot of safety in that, and everybody was watching out for everybody else's kids. It truly was a village, you know. We had Lanyap on the Bayou, which was a church festival that had international recognition, and it was a group of people. So there is something called the Cajun shame, right? And I grew up with a part of that. If you talk with a flat accent that was too heavy, people thought that you were uneducated. So when you went out in certain places, including myself, you had to try to speak properly, you know, without an accent, to where people would not think you were stupid, right? And I think Lanyap on the Bayou helped our community celebrate who they were as a people, because you have people from around the world coming to this event in Chauvin, celebrating these people for everything they were and everything they did. And the people took a lot of pride in that, and it gave us a sense of like, we Cajun, like we can celebrate this, and we can be proud of this. And I mean, not to fast forward, because I know we're going to go like in the present, you know, like talking about present, but one thing that I came to realize with Ida was that the Chauvin of my youth no longer exists. And I did not recognize that until after Hurricane Ida. I think I just kind of pretended that it was still the same. But over the course of the 80s to 2020s, people passed away, people moved, schools closed, post offices closed, and the community changed, but a lot of us were in denial, still in denial. But it's sort of like the hurricane came in and pulled the curtains wide open and said, like, this is what it really looks like. And it looks a lot worse. And after I just got done with it, it looks a lot worse. And so it's been so traumatic to try to figure, well, I mean, just the event itself was just traumatic. But to try to figure out how to put those pieces back together. And I know folks that, you know, are from Lake Charles, folks from New Orleans with Katrina, you know, they've grappled with those same things, and there's lessons to be learned. And I sometimes wonder, like, why didn't we learn? Like, there was something that we should have learned from Katrina, learned from Laura, but I feel like our community is just like, wow, we're blindsided by this. We never saw this coming. Yeah, of course we knew that this could happen, you know? But I just don't, like, I don't know how to, I need a formula that says, like, okay, 10 days after a devastating hurricane, say this, do that. But there's no, like, that doesn't fit, because all of it is just fluid and chaos and, ever changing, you know?
So backing up just a minute, you were in Brooklyn, you were a teacher, you were in the Peace Corps, but you decided to come back here. And tell us why you came back here and what you wanted to do.
it's home. Like I guess when I was younger, you want to go see things, you want to experience things, and maybe it was a stage of life thing that after seeing all of those places and experiencing those areas, I realized how amazing and how good I had it in Southern Louisiana. And I realized how close our family was with all the cousins. Like, I mean, my cousins are my brothers and sisters, but it doesn't exist like that everywhere else in the country or world, you know? Even your community, and just that people know each other and will help each other. And maybe that's also a result of hurricanes, because I thought about that, like, what if hurricanes are a part of our culture? And that's why we help each other, because typically when you go through a storm, you're helping all your neighbors get back on their feet. Ida was different because everybody needed help, and I couldn't help anybody because I needed help, and we weren't able to be there for each other, and that hurt too, you know.
Talk to us a little bit about when you realized, or when you learned about climate change, and when you started focusing on climate change and its impacts.
Now, for me, you know, when I was younger, I had started, you know, my working career. I was working with a local law firm in Houma as a legal assistant, and had offered to assist my people with our submission for federal acknowledgement, you know, which it literally looks like a legal brief, okay? And what you're having to do there is prove your identity and trace your ancestry all the way back to your historical tribe or tribes with documentation, right? And you must have documentation on every single tribal person. So my uncle was chief at the time, rest his soul. He was blind, legally blind, and could no longer, you know, get out and go to these different meetings and all of these things that were really starting to ramp up, right? So they asked me if I could start going to the meetings. And of course, they were kind of nudging at me, you know, saying, look, we're going to need another leader. We think you'd be a good fit. And I'm like, no. You know, like, I mean, that's big shoes to fill. You know, I knew the responsibility that my elders had, right? They are responsible to and for their people 24/7. And yeah, I really didn't think that I was cut out to do the job. I was 29. So I started going to these different meetings, right? And I remember we went to one that was like in Patterson, Morgan City area, you know, and they were having all of these discussions, and I didn't understand almost a single word they were saying, because it was in a language, right, that deals with things like levees and, you know, all of these different protection mechanisms, right, that I didn't know anything about. All I knew was that was a mud levee, right? And we knew basic things, but we didn't know in depth. And here they are, like, making decisions. And I don't see anyone from my community in there trying to help guide them, right? And a lot of what they said didn't quite fit, right? Because remember, our knowledges were different. I grew up with traditional ecological knowledge, which is generational. My people have been there for thousands of years. You know, so it's an intimate knowledge with your environment, which is being proven daily as a good, valid science. You know, and then of course they were utilizing their scientific knowledge, right? So there was no understanding of the language. Well, I became concerned, infuriated. I held my tongue, right, as best I could, but I definitely let them know that we were in the room. Yeah, and that I thought we needed to have more say, because we didn't know any of what they were talking about. And it was going to cost a lot of money. You know, so I I went to my uncle and I sat with him because I'd always give him an update, you know, and then we'd update the council and stuff. And, yeah, I was pretty upset about it. I'm like, no, I understand now why you said I need to start going to these meetings, right? And I said, we don't have a voice. And he looked at me and he said, you know what makes a good chief? No. He said, one that fights hard not to become one. See, chiefs are of service. A lot of people misconstrue the title. You know, this is not some glorified position. I am of service to my people. I have to listen to each one of them. I have to feel each one of them. I have to go through what each one of them goes through. You know, and just looking at everything and looking at my uncle and looking at our council, and I accepted. You know, I did. And I had a lot to learn because we were so busy just living our lives, right? Like Jonathan said, it was magical, right? We had everything we needed there. There was no reason for us to have to ever leave. You know, after seeing all of those things, you know, after really learning about what was happening, you know, that nobody really had come into our community to explain to us these things, I accepted the position, you know, because my generation had a little bit more education than the last generation, and they pushed, like they really stressed that, right? For example, my mom couldn't go to school past the 8th grade because she was Native, wasn't allowed, you know, so there was a gap in education there. Not that these people are not intelligent, you know, they can do things that you can't learn in a book, right? But the world was changing. And that meant that if we wanted to be able to survive and try to maintain and protect and preserve our culture and our lifeways and our land, we were going to have to go into that world. And I've been learning every single day ever since. You know, and it just seen so many changes over all these years. You know, but I can definitely say that I'm so proud of my people and who we are and how innovative we are. We've always adapted, always. Now, things are changing much faster than what we are used to, right? And those things all play together. Everything works in a circle. And now we have the climate crisis that's in the middle of all that, exacerbating everything. But that has not stopped us. You know, we still have a sense of responsibility to the land that we call home. You know, so we're doing everything that we possibly can that is environmentally responsible and also innovative and able to be replicated in other places.
When did you see the landscape changing and realize something bigger was happening?
When I was younger, my parents broke a lot of child labor laws and put me to work on a trawl boat at like 8 or 9 years old. And they gave me a cut of the money, and I was able to buy my first, you know, stereo and the whole 9 yards. But so growing up, I would hear stories that my dad would tell me about, you know, last year there was an island right here, and this year we can trawl right over this. And I didn't internalize that. I was like, okay, great. So maybe we could catch more shrimp now. You know, like it wasn't something he was trying to convey to me, that this wasn't a great thing. And I was worried about how much money my cut was going to be able to buy my television set the next go around, you know? And so I guess we grew up knowing that there were changes, but as a kid, you know, even for Hurricane Juan, our house flooded. I thought it was exciting. I was like, what? Look, I can catch minnows in my living room now instead of just the ditch, you know? And my parents were just devastated because we didn't have flood insurance. And so I remember the work that we put in to get our house back. We had carpet in. We took the carpet out and shampooed it outside. You had to throw away the little spongy stuff under it. But we didn't have insurance, we didn't have money. And so we saved the carpet from the flood and reinstalled it, and it didn't smell as nasty as you may think. It was actually pretty good. And so all of those things I didn't, like, now if my house was flooded, I'd be devastated, and my kid would probably be like, oh, what we go catch in the house, you know? I remember getting a job at the Wetlands Discovery Center and having to be very cautious at what I said about climate change. Now, this was 12 years ago, right, when I first got into it, because we're a nonprofit and we fundraise in Houma. Y'all are smart enough to put the pieces of that together. And so I had to be very careful about how I presented that. But then it's sort of when you're in this work and you see the data and you know the facts, there comes a point where you feel, by not sharing that information, no matter the cost, you do a disservice to your community in a way that is catastrophic, right? And so I remember still, being sensitive to a lot of topics until people give my name out to other people a lot. And so so the CNN reporters were coming in and doing an episode on climate change and places in the country that have the highest population of people who deny climate change. And they're like, call Jonathan. He'll talk about that on national news. And I was like, what? I gotta find some money for the checks of my staff next week. Don't put me in this. And then I remember being there, and I really just was able to, I just kind of spoke from my heart of what I felt about. And yeah. So then I got to be on national television and kind of sharing what I thought about that and sort of rip the Band-Aid off. And I'll say that over the years, from 12 years ago when I started, I feel as though our community has embraced, maybe not embraced, that's the wrong word. That seems to be like warm and cuddly, no, begrudgingly accepted the data, and they've experienced what that looks like and feels like, to where they're like, okay, maybe there's something to this that I need to really think about. Not everybody, but I think a lot more people have come to terms with what's going on.
How much, talk a little bit, and then we're going to move to the present. How is your culture formed by your land?
I mean, I don't want to, if you want, no, like it's for us, and I'm speaking from a Cajun man's perspective, right? Our culture is so tied into the land and water that exists around us, right? And so it's food. Food is such a huge part of who we are as a people. But it's also how we catch that food. It's the technology and how the technology kind of changes from, old school minute trap to the better advanced minute traps. And so we have conversations about that a lot. And I work with a team of folks, and Maida Owens, who's with us today, for the Bayou Culture Collaborative. And in that, we really try to hash out a lot of those challenges, because when you have a group of people that their culture is so tied into sense of place, what happens when they don't have that place? And what can you maintain if that place doesn't exist? You know what I mean? Like we haven't come up with the answer yet, but we've come up with a lot of questions, which is sort of where that process I think begins of like, how do we do this?
So building off of what Jonathan just said, how is your identity connected to your land and your place and your cultural practices? Well, Jonathan and I grew up right across the bayou from each other. And the truth is we're very similar. And to us, we are the land and the water. Like everything that is that area is us, right? And I don't know how to be anyone else. That's what I was made to be, right? And, we are traditional harvesters. We made living and sustained each other and, our families from fishing, shrimping, crabbing, oystering, trapping at one time. You can't really do too much hunting down there these days because you need land for that. But, it wasn't just that, medicinal as well. We had so many different medicinal plants that you didn't exactly have to go running to a doctor. You had things already there that were natural, right? And
I don't want to interrupt you, but like, because I get exactly what you're saying, and I think of, like there are things that we do in our community, like go and pick blackberries, during that season, and there's something that also when I do that as an adult connects me back to my childhood, as I did that as a kid with whomever, and then as I'm picking, it's sort of a meditative thing as you're picking blackberries, and I'm thinking, oh, I remember the time I picked blackberries with, not grit, and then you get those, and so it gives you this great feeling. And when you don't have access to that, that's what I'm trying to like figure out. If I don't have access to those things to then trigger those memories that go all around my identity, like what is that about? And I remember after the hurricane, the one thing that I was like, okay, maybe we can do this, was the thistles. So like we grow up eating thistles, and they grow in cow pastures on the side of the road, wherever. And there's a particular way that you harvest the thistle to get all the pickers off, and then it tastes like a celery, but it's like a sweet celery. But it's just a fun activity to go outside, and you do it with your family, and you're also sharing time and stories. And as you're doing this, and then the elders of your family show you how to do it in a better fashion. And I just remember seeing the thistles and then going and harvesting them and being like, we can be okay. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, the thistles have come back up. The thistles came up this year. Everything may be destroyed, but the thistles came up. And so it was like a real symbolic thing of, you said harvesting, and I'm like, that was who we were growing up.
yeah, I love this.
Me too.
Oh my goodness. And look, our lands were abundant with so many different things that you could eat, and it was natural, and our diets were natural, and we were so much more healthier then, because we lived right off the land. Beloved Creator gave us everything we ever needed, right there, and we were also able to make an income off that, and provide to others as well. But it literally is our identity. And as we lose more and more of Louisiana, we lose more and more of our beautiful identities, right? And there are many of us, and just the idea of losing any of our Louisiana cultures or people or methods or practices, that's beyond heartbreaking for me, because I've been to quite a few places, met quite a few different walks of people. Amazing, beautiful, right? I love learning about different cultures and people, but it wasn't home. There's just something about home. It even smells different. And that smell when the dew hits the grass, right in the evening, there's just this amazing natural scent, right? I can't even smell that anywhere else. You know, I keep trying to figure out if we could try to bottle it up.
Put it in a diffuser.
Something, you know, so that at least we have something, you know, but what Jonathan's saying is exactly right. It's like, how do we do this, right? When you go back and we'll just call it your happy place, right? How do you replicate that somewhere else when there is no place else like it, right? When the environment, because our environments are unique. So it's not exactly an easy thing to say, okay, well, we're just going to recreate this somewhere else. That's not possible. The grounds are different, the mud is different, the water's different, everything's different. You know, so yeah, it's.
And these are really real questions that you guys are both having right now. So let's fast forward to a larger tipping point, that Hurricane Ida. We've seen, I know of your struggles and with housing, and you know, Jason, the art display is so much about housing, but I would like to hear, tell us about what happened with Ida and what that meant for your community, what that community feels like today, what's the recovery look like. Do y'all talk a little bit about that? Because it's kind of different than past hurricanes.
Yeah. I think for us, it was the wind damage of the storm. We weren't used to that. We were used to water. We were used to a flooding event, and we know how to do floods pretty well. I think that going through it, because I didn't evacuate, and it was the strangest thing was how the landscape changed once we were able to drive, because then we had to go check on my mama's house and other people, and it was some buildings that were not there anymore, but a lot of it too were the trees. So you don't recognize or realize how much of your sense of direction and everything is around like the trees and everything that you see every day. Because you were going down and I felt like, I don't even feel like I'm in Chauvin. Like, am I on the right bayou? I mean, I see the bayou, but like, I was completely disoriented of where I even was. And then I think the next thing after that, that was traumatic, was the trash heaps that then were piled up. Because like as a part of the recovery process, they send these big, huge black trucks with the grapple hooks into neighborhoods. And so you had to make sure that you put your tree debris in a big pile here, and then your house debris in a big pile right here, because they had to be separated. Because then they chip all that. They don't teach you. They need to teach you that. Because some people got upset because they just put everything, and they're like, nope, you got to sort it. And so there was they would go and they would take it and fill up the trucks and then go to like a staging area. And there were everybody's house, everybody's stuff was together. A whole community, all of their possessions and their houses were together in this big, huge pile, because they just go drop them there. And then they would go, and then another truck would come and then take that and then take it away someplace. So like, I don't know where everybody's houses went. But driving by and seeing these mountains of debris really affected me in a way that, you know, it's sort of like, it was overwhelming.
It was everyone.
And it was everybody. I mean, not everybody's houses got destroyed. Not everybody's houses went in the, but pretty much everybody had something in the pile, whether it was shingles or a shed or their house or their trailer. Somebody had something in the pile. There's a weird sense of, there's nothing really beautiful about that, but there was a sense of beauty to me in my head of like, we're together. That's almost sad.
Yeah.
My grandma cried a lot, and I think I get that from her because I get real emotional a lot of times. But seeing everybody's stuff together kind of was like, a beautiful, tragic kind of thing. So then you just sort of like get into the trying to help people, trying to get some things done. And I think that I can deal with the hurricane, like I can deal with the wind, the storms, like pulling the tree branches to the road and everything. It's been the recovery process of the hurricane that has been really difficult. I thought that I would become desensitized to seeing the broken down buildings, and half of a building here, I thought like I'll pass by this 100 times and then I just won't see it and it'll be okay. But even today, every time I pass by that broken building, it just gets heavier and it just gets heavier and it's depressing. And I'm just like, man, maybe we can't come back from this. And people are leaving. People have left because of the storm. They lost their housing. A lot of folks, if they were renting or, their job shut down, so then they got a job someplace else. So like we have lost a lot of our population. But then there are those folks, who have stayed and like, okay, we might, we'll rebuild this, but it's just been really, really difficult in a way that I didn't know it was going to be difficult like this. Because I'm usually a cheerleader. I'm like, we got this, guys. Like, come on, let's get the gang together. And here I'm just like, I don't know.
And you've had how many people that you were trying to help get into houses? And
Over 200, myself included. So we never found all of our roof. We built my home with our bare hands, and we tore her down with our bare hands. She was almost finished. I had just finished my kitchen. That's the last best part. Okay, and look, we got some kitchens. The kitchen is everything. That's where everybody goes. That's, and it's where all the food is at. But we did not have insurance because we were not aware of all of the different insurances that could have been available to us. And for us trying to figure out what we were going to do, I mean, look, there are limitations. My husband has to work. Yeah, I mean, he was back at work less than a week after the storm, because they have things to do there also. So we were not able to leave. When I say we evacuated, we went to Thibodeau, right, with my mom. And granted, yes, that was safer, but not safe. But it was like, I can still see it. It was definitely different, right? Like Jonathan said, we're used to water. I remember the mud. You come in there, your crew, your family comes in, they spray all that mud out. You bleach everything really good. You clean everything really good. Cut your walls, gut that, slap it back up, you're good to go. If this would have been flooding, we know how to deal with that. But it was wind, and it took homes, took them. And the pile that Jonathan's talking about was not far from my home, and I remember I could see my blue wall for like a week. And in a way, I'm kind of thankful, because I think it helped me grieve a little bit, passing by and seeing it, and then eventually it was gone. But we were together. We were together. And so we've not, I think what I realized is that these storms are becoming much more severe, right? And we were not equipped, structurally to be able to withstand that. Now we're learning those lessons, and there are things that many of us are doing to try to make sure that we are better equipped that next time, right? But the recovery is going to be very long. And one good example, my husband and I don't qualify for anything. So our predicament, and you're going to find a lot of people in these situations, right? They either didn't have insurance or were underinsured. Okay. They make good money, but not enough money to just jump up and go get another mortgage. And in this case, there really wasn't anything available anyway for us to just jump into, right? Because so much was damaged and so many were looking for homes. We had to make a makeshift shelter out of what we had left. And then that got rained on for, I think it was Nicholas that went to Texas. You know, and my neighbors let us go stay in their damaged house that was still somewhat livable and safer. You know, but we couldn't take a trip back and forth every day. That was too much. We needed to be there so that we could start the work. You know, plus I needed to be where my people could find me. And there were so many that needed so many different things. But, you know, the biggest thing I think that we're learning is a lot of these programs that are designed, that are supposed to assist, really are not considering everyone in our society, especially the most vulnerable, right? Many of them simply do not qualify for some of these programs, whether it be paperwork, income, you name it, right? My husband and myself, well, in one instance, we make too much income, and for us, because we bought the house that, you know, was for my neighbors, and we needed to get our kids in a home. Well, because we went and bought another house, well, we don't qualify for anything, right? And that's okay, we'll do it. But that it's having programs that are not fully inclusive of the actual circumstances and everyone that is in society further delays these disasters, right? For example, we were expected to be able to get online to put in applications or call in. We didn't have service. Like, how are we going to do that? And the closest place to do that was all the way in Houma. Now, that's like at least 30, 45 minutes away for some people. Now, if you got to figure out if you're going to put gas in your generator, all right, to be able to keep at least some milk cold for your baby while you're swatting off the mosquitoes, are you going to put that gas to go to Houma for FEMA? No, you're gonna make sure you have what you need, right? I mean, it's just, it's further strained.
You know, imagine those of you who have renovated a home and lived in it. Like, have you done that, or have you had to? Right, it wasn't pleasant. Probably, if you have to like move things around your house and do that, especially if you're in a relationship with spouse or someone else, might get a little tense, right? It was hard. What color we painting the walls? No, I want the counter here. I don't want Formica. I want marble. You know, you felt that. So imagine an entire community renovating at the same time, fighting for contractors, fighting your insurance companies to be able to get the money to rebuild the things that you lost. And if you're lucky, you're living in a little camper with all of your family and the people you ain't getting along with at the moment, right? It's hard. So then that translates to people in the drive-thru at Popeyes yelling and being upset and angry. So like our whole community right now is angry and they're upset, because everything that they knew and loved, like their sacred places, those spaces that they could retreat to for comfort when everything was going wrong, has been taken away from them. And so everybody is on edge and everybody's angry with each other. It don't matter who you are and what you said. Everybody's ready to get at you. And so that's a part of the recovery process that like I didn't think about. You know, I'm like, yeah, we got this. And like, well, I didn't realize everybody's going to be depressed and angry, and I don't know how to help them through it because I am depressed and angry, you know?
Will you talk to us a little bit about the population movement? Because we can see in the data, we know people have been moving one town up. What does that mean culturally, this upward movement, this upward migration?
Well, for my people, we've always moved, right? That's historical. Like, I mean, up until we were forced to settle in like one spot. But you lived with the land, so you understood that as you utilized resources in this area, okay, now we got to give it a break, right? So let's go over here, right? And it was just an understanding of how you have to allow things to heal, right? You need to protect and preserve before you utilize or take. For example, we always say we hope the shrimp will give it, right? We don't say we're going to catch shrimp. No, we hope the shrimp will give it. And I'm sorry, I lost track.
That's good. My people moved. My people got kicked out of Nova Scotia.
Yes.
My people really moved. And that's what we laugh about, because like in my family, like, maybe we just go back. So maybe they'd be like, hey, Jonathan, like, been a few generations, but like we're over that. And so it's just like one traumatic episode after another. And so, but again, and it's based on what you just said, I think there is strength in looking at migration patterns, because this is not our first rodeo, right? Even, especially with Native American populations, but even with Cajun populations, that, Last Island, there was a whole resort there, and then in the 1800s, a hurricane hit, wiped it all out, and people had to move. My family has moved from, generation to generation, one town north of the same watershed. So maybe that's a part of our culture, maybe that's a part of our story, but what is different about now is that a lot of folks are talking about moving more than just one community. We're talking about moving like north, like out of Louisiana, north, and in a place that is more climate stable. I don't even know what the word for that is. Like a place where like you can not have to worry so much about, I know you got to worry about plenty of things everywhere, anywhere you go, like I get it, but a lot of folks don't want to do this again.
No, and thank you, Jonathan, for bringing back, but like, we used to live up the bayou, okay, once upon a time. Well, as the land, eroded away, well, now we're down the bayou. Thank you. But if you look back through time, as storms came in and as we began having issues with land loss, people would move a little bit further up, and those were small, not so traumatizing movements that still kept you within the unit, right, within the community. Well, I mean, looking at the things that are happening now, it's like, Jonathan, they're making big jumps. Like my neighbors, don't get me wrong, I'm extremely thankful that they were so loving and so kind to us to want us to have that home. But I don't have them anymore. And they went all the way to Mississippi, right? And look, I get it. They were like, look, we just can't do this anymore. We're elders, and if this is the way these systems are going to work and they're not working, well, then we need to make sure that we can survive the next time something happens, right? And that's where the mindset of a lot of people, I think, are going to. One time we used to just move a little bit further up, but you also have to be realistic, and you have to look at the issues as a whole now, right? And I think many more people are just like, okay, if we're going to move, let's just move so we don't have to keep moving anymore, which can be very devastating for a community. We've seen it happen, to communities. Even worse for communities that do not have protection.
And let's think a little bit about the future. Temperatures are increasing. We're going to get to 1.5 degrees. We know that's going to lead to a certain amount of ice melting, glaciers melting, sea level rise. We've got the science. We just aren't necessarily sure when. Lots of tipping points, more intense storms, longer lasting, the rainfall events, precipitation has increased.
Are you trying to cheer me up?
No, I'm saying, like, I mean, these are things that we've all discussed. painting the picture for
No,
everyone else.
I know.
And we've talked about planning. We've done some planning for Chauvin. We're discussing for the tribe. What does the future look like for you guys? And you brought something up the last time we talked about maybe it's a gradual shift. And so I'm wondering, how is it that we plan for the future? And a lot of that is about moving people.
That's correct. And look, we didn't come to this decision easily. All right. So the way we are having to look at things, and this is just our reality. If we're going to protect and preserve our people, our culture, our identity, our language, we need to stay together. Right? That's just the way it works. So knowing what we know now, knowing the outcome of the area, we know that you can't force people to move, right? Because I'm not going anywhere right now. I'm not. If I'm blessed enough, maybe I'll be able to stay. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we also need to be more proactive and we need to be realistic. So for my people, we're kind of doing a two-pronged deal, right? Where, okay, we know people are going to stay. So those who are going to stay, let's build resiliently. Let's make sure that we understand what the future holds for us and do what's necessary to be able to stay there, right? As long as we can. And on the other end of that, we are looking for lands further inland. You know, we are working with a geologist, you know, and she asked me, she's like, so what can I do for you? I said, I need you to tell me where my people need to go that can sustain them for the next 200 years, at least. You know, a place where they can still do the things that they do now, right? Amazingly enough, there is one.
Don't tell nobody.
I am.
Don't say it. I mean, tell me later, but don't say it.
Well, you're with us, you know that. But, you know, now granted, that's it's suspect, right? We're like, well, based on what we know so far, and I'm like, but will it sustain us? She's like, well, we got to look at that. You know, but there's this one little spot. Yeah, so but that's our reality, right? So what we're expecting to have happen, look, a lot of your elders stay. They're like, nah, I got this. We ain't going nowhere. I know, we're going to be one of them. The younger ones, right? You're going to have like your 20-something-year-olds. They're like, okay, we can't keep doing this, and the systems aren't functioning the way we need them to, so we're going to have to go somewhere that we can actually survive. Well, we want to be able to do that for them and still make sure we all survive in a sense, right? Our identity survives, that we don't completely lose that part of Louisiana. We might lose the land, but maybe we can bring that back in another place, right? Now that is not going to happen overnight. It's not. It takes serious planning. We've watched examples that we will not follow. You know, this is something that we know that if we're going to do this, the community itself needs to guide it, right? Who better to know what we need than us? You know, so it's going to take some time, but we understand that we need to move, but we're going to do it our way. You know, in a way that is not so traumatizing, right? And in securing land, should that big rush of help us not another Ida, right? We never wish that for anyone. But should something like that occur, right, to where we are completely devastated and now we have no way to build back, well, we'll have a place to go, right? So we've started working with universities and, you know, all of these different groups to try to pull in these ideas and these plans, while still trying to provide for those that are going to stay behind. right? Like, okay, for example, we worked on a project with one university, right? And that was before IDA. And we're like, look, we need this multifunctional community center that can serve as an educational hub, where it can really serve the community, citizens as a whole, right? Not just tribal, because we don't work that way. And can also serve them during times of disaster. If they need a place to come and get some food, they need a shower, they need, like if they need shelter, right? They can come here. And it's right here in the community where they need it, so it's close to where they live. Then Ida hit, and we realized that that design would not withstand a Category 5, right? We were designing for a Cat 3, okay, which was the typical procedure. And we were like, oh, snaps, right? So then we took those plans with the permission of the university and went further with them. And I'm going to tell you, it's trying to get funding for these wonderful new innovative ideas is not easy. Okay, it's really not. These are new ideas. These are new concepts that are actually being drawn out. And we're like, okay, now we're ready to build it. And they're like, well, we only have money for studies. And I'm like, but we've been studied to death, right? We need to start implementing things. So we won't give up. I mean, as long as there are people that are in that community, they're going to have needs, so we want to at least try to do what we can to make sure that they are safe. Because I don't have any intention on leaving anytime soon. That's what I know, but we at least want to be prepared for those that are going to have to leave, so that when they say, okay, we just can't do this anymore, we're like, okay, but let us bring you here, right? So you can still be who you are. You can still be with your family, with your people. And, we'll see you eventually, right? Takes a lot of work to get to that point, though, especially when there weren't that many programs or funding opportunities or even other groups that are on the cusp of some of these things, but it's growing, right? And wonderful friends here are some of those same people that are very innovative and coming up with these new ideas on how we can actually thrive as a people. Yeah.
Here's what I think is going to happen. A friend of mine just bought a house in Chauvin. It's a wood frame house, not huge, and she's got a mortgage. And in order to keep that mortgage, she has to pay $11,000 a year in insurance, because that's what insurance costs on this little wooden house in Chauvin right now for her to live next door to where her mom is living, and she wants to be close to her family because that's how we all grew up, right? I think that it is going to be the insurance companies and the banks that push people out of the bayou communities because they will not be able to afford to live there. The only people that are going to be able to be there are going to be people who are able to self-insure. And that means that just like the community of Cocodrie that my dad grew up in, that had a school and a church and a grocery store and a thriving community, back in, I'd say probably the 60s, 50s, 60s, like Cocodrie was a thriving community. It is now multi-million-dollar camps that are beautiful, but it's because those folks can afford to build those things because, like I said before, the magic in Chauvin and the land has not changed. It is still a beautiful and desirable place to be because you can go fishing and maybe not hunting quite as much, but you can do all of those wonderful things and be a part of that experience, right? And it's a desirable experience. So much so that people are willing to spend millions of dollars to be there, right? So my guess is that as things progress, Cocodrie is going to get wiped out like Last Island did, right? So Last Island was a beautiful resort where all the rich people went to hang out. History repeating itself a little bit. They got wiped out by a hurricane. Some people passed away. It was horrible. That will happen again in Cocodrie, right? Because the storms are going to become more frequent. They're going to become stronger, wetter. Like we know this. We're seeing it, right? And so Chauvin is going to be the new Cocodrie. And where I grew up in a modest little house, but had a wonderful childhood in a community that was beautiful, there will be elevated camps that will be multi-million dollars. Inflation keeps going, maybe multi-billion dollars. Rich people gonna be real rich by that time. And Chauvin is gonna be the saltwater fishing capital of the world, as Cocodrie is being called. So with that said, all like our community, I agree, like this is what, again, Maida and I have conversations about this over and over again. Because you do want to keep your people together to try to maintain that culture, because it's really hard for it to exist independently, right? So with this coming, and God, I hope it's not as soon as I think it will be, we have to figure this piece out, because it will be a tragic loss for the state of Louisiana for this to be lost without a little bit of thought of what we could do to preserve it. And when I say to preserve it, I'm not, the levees help, 100%. I'm 100% with the levees. But this is not going, that's not going to save us. We're going to have to figure out something else. I don't know what that is yet, but we got to figure it out. And there are some technologies that don't exist yet that might solve a whole bunch of problems, right? It's happened before, it can happen again. But I need some scientists to start working quick.
Well, we've actually started working on a couple of different projects, and Jonathan, I know you're familiar with this, but like living shoreline,
Yeah.
right? It's the natural environment, helping to protect and preserve the natural environment. And what that is the oyster shells, right? And you put that up as a barrier against the land, and it really holds in there. And one of the tribal communities, Punashandian tribe, currently has a project going on to protect some of their sacred sites that are surrounded by water. It held up through Ida.
Mm-hmm.
The living shoreline held up through Ida. Another thing that we're working on is canal backfilling, right? That is a very natural way to try and heal some of the harms that have been done over so many decades. You know, there's so many abandoned canals, you know, that they're just not being used anymore. Well, we want to get those filled back in, right? So that they can start to heal and not widen further, because that also adds to our land loss, right? So we're trying to do everything that we can within our own abilities, right? That we know that have proven effective. It would be very helpful if they would be like, sure, here's all the permits you want. Go do what you got to do, right? But it's a process to everything. You know, which is why I've said we have so much learning to do every day. Yeah, but it's going to literally take new, innovative science with traditional ecological knowledge and that intimate understanding of the environment, so that we don't cause more harm to an already fragile ecosystem that has been extracted from and harmed so much. You know, and look, we joke and we're like, yeah, all those camps down there, you know, don't get me wrong, you look at them, they're beautiful, but we call them the eyesore of Dulac. All right.
The what?
The eyesore of Dulac. Oh. Well, and it's explained, right? You have all these new codes that come in, the regular residents, they're on a, you know, they're on a fixed income, you know, elderly, they don't have that kind of money to meet these new codes. So they get bought out for pennies on the dollar. You know, and now they're not in their homes anymore. They're stuck, you know, with family or whatever. And then the next thing you know, you got all these camps popping up. And the one thing that we're starting to speak about is trying to get some of these, you know, hopefully when these lands are getting into other hands, is hopefully conservationists, right? Because putting a camp there is not going to help anybody.
Sure.
right? Okay, if the residents can't live there anymore, no one can. No one. We need to stop building these structures there and do what's necessary to try to heal that land as much as possible, because guess what? She's already fragile. Building something on there, constantly cutting the grass, and they might be there every so often tending to it. That's not going to do it any good. And I think the biggest thing that we try to make people understand is, look, we're going to do everything we possibly can because that's what we do, right? But it's, really praying that people pay very close attention, because this will happen to others if nothing is done. It's happening to us right now. And we're documenting everything, we're doing what we can, and we're sharing that knowledge with others, because we don't want this to happen the way that it happened to us. But it's going to take every single one of us.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories, taking us through the past and your childhood and what's happening now. I would love to ask the audience if there are any questions before we go. Does anyone have a question?
Shirell, this is Maida Owens. I am intrigued with the couple that moved to Mississippi. Because one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is how can we help people move together. And typically people move for jobs or family. So how did they choose a place? And are they following somebody, or is anybody following them?
And that's, I'm sorry, I've known them for years. They took what was available, because that's what people are having to do. And I let them know that if it didn't work out there, and when we figure out what we're going to do, they can come back home with us. They're not native, wonderful, wonderful people. And just the sweetest couple. Mr. John was the pediatrician for Job Air for years. Miss Colette's a nurse. And, my kids love them. They were just salt of the earth, just good, wonderful people, and just, don't get me wrong, they shared with me where they were going, and the home is beautiful, but it's not the same. The soil is not the same. Nothing is the same, and we worry about them if we stay in touch. But no, they did what was necessary. They looked at the situation and they found the best option they could that took them far away from their children, and it's definitely different for them. It's an adjustment, and any opportunity that we have to be able to work together to make sure that doesn't happen, because maybe you know how we all are. We understand that when we are young, we are dependent upon our parents and our grandparents, our family unit. As elders, we become dependent also, right? And we've maintained that structure, right? We already know it. Like my sister's already said it. Yes, Shirell's taking mom. And I am. I will. It's that unit that we have, that sense of family that we have, and you lose a piece of yourself when that gets stripped away from you like that.
One thing that's really, if I may, I don't mean to interrupt you. One thing that really resonated with me in speaking to a friend of mine who was moving away, and she said that this was the first time in her life that she was moving away from something. She said all the times before when I left Houma, I was moving to something. I was moving to go to school. I was moving to go to a new exciting job. I was moving towards something that was exciting. And she always came back because that's typically what we do down the bayou. And she said, this is the first time I'm moving away from something and I hate the way that this feels. And so then I thought, look, because I mean, full disclosure, my family and I have this conversation often. If we move, where are we moving to? What am I doing for work? What does that look like? And I've come to the realization, and I think that, again, this is something with the work that we're doing with Maida and the Bayou Culture gatherings and the collaborative, is figuring this out and giving people tools that say, if you're gonna move, figure out something to move toward. Create some excitement that will draw you to that place that you're gonna go. Let that help you to move, not feel like the house is on fire, get the hell out. Like, it needs to be something exciting and fulfill your heart, not make you feel like you're such a loss.
I think that attitude is probably what many immigrants came to this country, escaping persecution, whatever they're escaping. They came to America for the opportunity, not to escape something which was the reason they left. They saw America as an opportunity. And I think that ties in. It's that mental framework. But I just wanted to mention a documentary that kind of not summarizes, but captures some of what you said. I don't know how many people here have seen a documentary called Forgotten Bayou. It's about the sinkhole in Bayou Corn. 10 years ago, it was August of 2012. One of my close friends is the one who wrote, produced, directed it. And it's all about people in a community divided because many people didn't want to leave their homes. Others felt they didn't have a choice. And it's a very even-handed documentary, even though Texas brine with the sinkhole and their drilling and the salt domes may have been the cause of it. The movie doesn't really blame that company. My friend interviewed all of the citizens, and you really get a feel for people, not how they felt about their land, their home. And I think our theme is it can happen anywhere, anytime. It could be a hurricane, it could be a tornado, it could be a fire. That community, a sinkhole just overnight, and if people don't leave in the middle of the night, then they disappear in that sinkhole. But if you get a chance, just Google Forgotten Bayou, and you may only get to see the trailer. I'm not sure what streaming it's on right now, but my friend really surprised all of us because her background had nothing to do with film and that industry. She was a salesperson for SC Johnson, selling Glade. And all of a sudden, she just got intrigued by that community's disaster and produced an incredible film. I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
I wanted to say I actually went down to Homa after Ida with my friend. Her name is Megan Falvey, and her grandfather, his first name is Human, lived down, I want to say, it's the Bayou, I don't know, I can't remember. But we went down there to his house, and I've been through hurricanes and all that lots of times. I've lived on coastal Mississippi and Louisiana. So. But I know that her family her grandfather is still not back in his house, and I don't know that he's going to go back. And her family lives in Homa, her mother and her stepfather. And they are talking about maybe moving away, because of what they went through. And, I work in environmental science. I have a master's in earth and environmental science. And with all of the billions of dollars that are spent on coastal restoration, do you feel that is being invested wisely? Do you see any projects that are helping in your communities? How do you feel about that? Because, you know, as someone who is from here and has worked very hard to protect this place, I'm very critical of the projects that are undertaken by the Corps and, you know, the state and where our money is being invested. So I just wondered how you feel about that. And I know that's a tough question, but I'm one of those people that likes to ask tough questions. So.
No, and I appreciate it. I do. So, of course, we are not federally acknowledged, right? And that is the word of the day. Now, other departments and agencies are really moving in the right direction when it comes to working with Indigenous peoples, regardless of your status, right? But in order to have a seat at the table with a lot of these agencies that are the deciding factor. The minute we say that we're tribal, because that's who we are, we're not federal. All right, so that means we can't control a project. That means we can't, right? Like it's up to them if they want to bring us to the table. They don't have to. We've been in the federal acknowledgement process for over 26 years. You know, and you have people with a lot of mixed feelings about that process. I don't support it one bit, but that's not my decision. My people need federal acknowledgement, right? And what that will allow, first of all, then comes the word free and prior informed consent. Makes a big difference, right? Then they can't just come in and do these different projects without consulting with us, and in some cases without our approval. No, we're not going to agree with every single project that's being put out there. We're just not. And a lot of that comes down to how much more harm than good, right? We pull the scales out. Okay, and at this point, we have not only been subjected to extractive practices, right? But just witnessing it, just and everything that it's caused. You know, we can't support every project, but in the same breath, we don't have a voice for all of them either.
I think the majority of those projects have value in that it buys us time to figure this part out, right? Because without those levee systems and those restoration projects, we would have even less time than we do. And so it buys us some time to figure it out a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, we're a buffer parish for you guys.
Yeah.
So it's in your best interest that there's these coastal projects that are buying us a little bit of time to figure it out, to figure out what we're gonna do and where we're gonna go. Because after we're going, it's y'all, you know, and it will be. I mean, I don't want to be like wah wah wah, but it's the science is there. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, literally all the way up to Baton Rouge. That's what they're saying.
Yes, sir. Tie-dye.
It's a funny situation that we're in Louisiana, because we have a troposphere up there that's about 6-8 miles thick, and it's being eaten away by carbon and greenhouse gas, and some of that is being released from extractive, a different use of extractive operations here in Louisiana. And this is some of what's contributing to global warming. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with a report in March, and they said the previous report was in 2014, and global warming is happening much more quickly than they have projected in 2014 to 2021. It is a 7-year span.
Yeah.
Is there any chance, any of you think, that the citizens of the state of Louisiana can come to some knowledge of the fact that there's a loop that's going on, and we're beating that loop, and that loop is causing us a lot of damage on our coastline.
Such a hard question. So the state, we are the only Gulf South state that has a climate action plan that aims to get at net zero by 2050. The reality is that 66% of the emissions in Louisiana come from oil, gas, and industrial processes. And so our energy grid, for example, relies solely on natural gas. For us to switch to clean energy sources, we don't currently have the infrastructure to be able to take it in. And so I think that with all the billions of dollars that are coming in through the two different bills, the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a strange name, I can't get used to that one, we have a chance to begin curbing those emissions to a great degree, but it's going to be the state that needs to make some smart decisions and smart investments in how that is done. I will tell you, I was fortunate enough to be with the governor and the Louisiana cohort at the United Nations conference in Glasgow. It was the COP26. And as a planner, I was surprised by the conversations, the bilateral conversations and the conversations happening amongst nations. Because in my mind, they weren't even at the planning stage. There were a lot of pledges being made, and what we've seen in report after report is countries and companies, there's pledges being made on carbon abatement, but it's not happening. It's not happening fast enough. I think scientists are generally coming around the understanding that we're not going to be able to stay under 1.5 degrees. I think the new threshold is 2 degrees. And so I ask myself all the time, what is it going to take for us to wake up? Because we are on the front lines here. We're feeling it. Our people have been feeling it. There should be a large tipping point around 2035 where a lot of other people are going to be feeling some of what we've been feeling. And so I don't know if anyone can answer that question, but I think it requires all of us to pay attention, to know the science, to get involved, and to make some noise. And we have to all fight for this place.
No.
No. It's a hard one. Frank?
I guess I'm just prejudiced, but I always look at these things from an economic perspective. Well, all touched on. And it all gets back to the land. Is that, how do we honor the land? One of the tools that has been developed, and I think Chief is actually going to participate in the national conference, it's going to be in New Orleans in September, is this idea of land conservation. And I would strongly encourage everybody here to begin to understand that subject and how it can become a tool to begin to address some of these unique problems that we have here, especially along the coast. We're beginning to pick up some lands along the coast. Our initial project was to look at the farmland up in the north, on the North Shore. And all of a sudden we began to realize that model is applicable to just about all these different situations. It's a way to say, okay, sure, this land is going to stay inside this particular use, and people who actually own the land are actually going to benefit because of the tax code and other things. And I would strongly recommend that everybody begin. We have it's called the Land Trust of Louisiana, which is the state
Created
operation.
after Katrina.
Yeah, and we developed it after Katrina. Well, there's also a private land trust, of course, a nature conservancy. I never forget, after Katrina, we had a conference in Hammond, and we brought in some people from the Farm Land Trust, which is an organization up in the north. And we said, we've got a problem here in this particular parish because of the dairy farmers are going out. And what's going to replace the dairy farmers? Are there going to be these multi-billion-dollar camps on the river? You know, nobody wanted that. It's going to change the entire thing. I happened to go to a big garden show in Folsom, and the people from the Nature Conservancy were there. And I went up to them and I said, got this crazy idea that we actually ought to form a local land trust, not a national, not the Nature Conservancy and all these big things we're out of control. But I don't want to conflict with what you have. And they looked at me and they said, conflict? You're exactly what you need, because we're a national organization, we have certain parameters that we have to deal with. We've got to match. And a lot of times people come to us in Louisiana that we can't fit into our model. But if we had a local land trust, then all of a sudden we can work with it and be flexible enough to begin working with the people in the local communities.
Thank you.
And it's growing. I mean, we've got over 1 million acres in conservation right now. It's just a little dinky thing out of Hammond. Okay? And so I'm looking at the infrastructure bill and trying to figure out, and we knew we passed some legislation to encourage it, okay? And I'm trying to figure out some other aspects of that legislation that actually would say, this is a viable tool. It's an economic tool. It's not in the normal range of what we think about as far as property and economics, but it fills a huge void. And so I encourage everybody here to understand what this is all about, and especially attend the conference in New Orleans, the national conference. And I think you're on the panel. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And anyway, that's my critique.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you to Jason and the Baton Rouge Gallery for hosting us all. And I can't express my love and gratitude and sincere, just heartfelt desire to want to be able to be part of the solution, to be part of the Bayou community, to be in Baton Rouge. Lots of things happen here, lots of decisions happen here, and we need to take what we've heard today and try to spread that message and lift you all up. And we know where we can write checks.
Right.
Is it South Louisiana Wetlands Center?
SLWDC will make it easy for you.
But thank you all so much for driving up here and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Camille, can I add that anybody can participate in the Bayou Culture Collaborative?
Yes.
We have
Absolutely.
monthly Zoom meetings on these topics and working groups to work towards solutions.
Wonderful, yeah.
Proposals.
And how do people find out about it? Where do they go?
LouisianaFolklore.org.
LouisianaFolklore.org. Great. Thank you,
I
Maida.
have flyers if anybody would like them.
Yeah, Miss
Awesome.
Maida is amazing. Yeah, thank you for your leadership, Maida. Okay.